7 and Group 8 are Sudarshan Rambhadram and Aniket Kaliji. Before that, I would like to introduce our mentors for today. Mentor for Group 7 is Sudarshan Rambhadramji. He is the Deputy Director of India Foundation. And mentor for Group 8 is Aniket Kaliji. He's the council member of the World Organization for Student and Youth and former Secretary General of the World Organization for Student and Youth, and so also a socio-political activist. Now I would like to call Sudarshan Rambhadramji to please introduce the chair.
Okay, we'll waste no time. Vidya ji is from Microsoft. She's focused over a decade of work at the organization covering strategy and outreach. She's worked extensively in India and abroad with the industry, government, and academia, both within and outside of India. You've already seen her speaking at connectivity session. Some of you have interacted informally with her. So the format of the session is such that she'll open it with brief remarks and we'll go with the flow with her. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction. Just one correction, I'm no longer with Microsoft Reset, so that's it. I think some part of my talk would be repetition because you heard me cover the same topic yesterday during the panel discussion. But however, this slides have little more details on what is going on. So I'm saying that digital connectivity is a need. I'm going to explain why we are saying that. So if you look at the context, right now, all the end users think that they're familiar with mobile phones or Wi-Fi devices or the fixed connectivity that you get in offices. But the overall infrastructure is a bigger thing, which is the most important thing. Like, you know, it's offered by governments in many countries, including India, where we offer satellites and specifically some of the fiber optic networks and things like that. And also large companies like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, they've all got into this game because everyone knows connectivity is the biggest issue and 3 billion plus are still not connected. And how do we make that happen? Let me talk about what's going on in India. India being the IT leader, as you all know, at a global level and regionally, definitely there's no competitor for India. We have been able to offer software, hardware, and various services. And apart from that, obviously, you need connectivity to make things happen. You cannot just work in isolation. You cannot ignore either hardware, software, or connectivity when you have to make it digitally connected world. And if you look at various technologies that need to be built for security, surveillance, various other opportunities, and with a very grand plan from our Prime Minister to build smart cities, as well as Digital India, that means every document is being digitized, or every offering, every service is digitized. Like, you know, by a click of your button, you actually make any services being offered, whether it's, you know, paying your daily bills or getting to know about your healthcare issues or whatever. So right now, what's going on? Right now in India, we have about 1 billion mobile phones. Data is almost cheap, or nobody's paying for data. It's you know, with some new players in the industry, we are also, I would say it's almost negligible when it comes to data. And then we have Wi-Fi deployments already in tier 2, tier 3 cities because of companies, SMBs, having a big role there, contributing to the economy. And if you look at other things, India is working with academia, industry to see what kind of new technologies can be offered. A lot of experimenting is going on to learn what's going on. And then we're offering connectivity to schools, hospitals. There are some exclusive connections that are being offered because you want to make sure that there are this connectivity everywhere, and Digital India and smart cities will come true very soon. Some of the things that I would like to highlight is India has already offered an exclusive satellite, which is called GSAT-9, for regional countries, like, it's called SAARC countries, South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation. And it's exclusively for connectivity and communication and meteorology. That means we are sharing, enabling other countries to use this satellite only for these purposes. That means we have already taken some leadership role in the region. And apart from that, for our own country, we are actually offering what's called optical fiber network. That's the backbone for connectivity, right? You need the optical, there's something called the backhaul and the last mile, right? Most of us, as I said initially, we are used to using the cell phone or the Wi-Fi, that's the last mile. Then the backhaul is the actual infrastructure. And India has very ambitious plans of having somewhere between 8 and 10,000 gram panchayats being connected, and India has 600,000 villages. So there's a very ambitious plan of connecting all these villages and making it truly connected and offering services. It's become an urgent need for any country, right? It's a way of life. The way we have roads, the way we have transportation, the way we are used to certain things in life, it has become part of our life to have connectivity. If we don't have connectivity, even on our phone, we get irritated, like, I don't know what's happening, I don't have email, I don't have access to Facebook. So it's become way of life, we can't ignore it. So how do we address that? Like, expectations are too high. We want everything tomorrow, we want everything to be at my hand. I don't have even patience levels, the threshold has come down. So it has to happen sooner than later in any part of the world, for example. It's also contributing significantly to the economy, right? The way you're able to make payments and do business. It's increasing the volume in shorter time. So it's contributing to the economy. So what are the things that we need to look at is access, pricing, technology, what kind of services are offered, and how do we maintain and manage them. So far I've already talked about using government-provided infrastructure like satellites or optical fibers and things like that. Private companies are also offering, right? Google is offering what's called loons, which is a balloon which is floated at stratospheric level, and it's supposed to cover some 80 kilometers distance. And they're also working with rail network in India to offer connectivity for about 500 railway stations. And in addition to that, if you look at Facebook, Facebook has something called a connectivity lab, and they're experimenting with a lot more things. Like, they have something called Aquila, which is a drone. When I say drone, it's not a small drone. It's the size of Boeing 737. And they also have recently launched what's called Tether Tenor, which is using helicopters. And they have Express Wi-Fi. These are the things they're already experimenting and implementing in multiple countries. The other large player is Microsoft. They're looking at what's called the TV white spaces technology. TV white space is basically, I don't know whether you're familiar with how the spectrum allocation happens. The megahertz, sub-gigahertz spectrum is for radio, microwave, and TV and various other daily usage, right? And why it's at a lower level is the propagation of the waves is much deeper. And TV also is allocated between 470 to 680 megahertz. And the channels between the TV is what's called white space. The unused space in the spectrum is called TV white spaces, which is not being used, which is like such a precious thing. So Microsoft is looking at how to promote that. And so that is the access part of it. If you look at pricing, there's a lot of confusion because there's a lot of volatility. Some mobile players are giving it absolutely free, and some are charging exorbitant amount. And governments are confused because they auction spectrum and they see immediate revenues in terms of billions of dollars. But is that what it is? Should we make it free? Because if you look at Wi-Fi, which is a 2.4 gigahertz, which is a free spectrum at a worldwide level, Wi-Fi has generated a lot more businesses, lot more revenue, lot more growth opportunities. So it is a lot of debate going on in multiple countries, and some have already, come up with policies, like Singapore in this region has already come up with a policy, and I know many countries are working on policy for this. So what makes sense, right? That pricing debate is still going on, and nobody really knows what's the right thing for each country. You can't generalize that. Technology. I already said you cannot ignore hardware, software, and connectivity because they're all interrelated. And also various kinds of technologies that's being made available, whether it is Facebook's or Google's or Microsoft's. We should not ignore any of this. You should just give the opportunity to offer everything and give the customer the choice. Because more and more you open up, it depends on the terrain. Okay, the connectivity may have to be different for each terrain or each requirement. It may be different for an emergency response. So depending on that, we just need to make everything available so that there's a choice for people to develop more apps, more services, as well as creating newer opportunities. So when I say services, it's, infrastructure is one piece. You build technology. Facebook is an easier example if everyone relate to. It's like an app and a technology, right? If you don't build that, the service is not offered. The advertisements, the various feeds that you get is not offered. Services means that. So you need to be able to build the technology which will help offer services, which will help offer supply chain management, which increases easier access, easier reach, for healthcare especially, making sure that drugs are reached or vaccines are reached in time makes a lot of sense. But you can use technology to do that. You can create new markets through services, right? Because of connectivity, there are many new markets that can open up. And you can also, basic healthcare, education, agriculture, this is part of life. You need to offer all those services. And when you do all this, you need to have maintenance in place, because if you don't have the maintenance, and everything can crash, and how do you actually communicate with people? So maintenance and management plays a very important role, which cannot be ignored. So moving forward, if you look at the benefits, you can get the relevant data for relevant region. Like, you don't have to just throw out all the data for all the regions because it may not make sense. It can be regionalized, and you can provide regional data. Services and applications can also be regionalized. You can focus on it in an appropriate way. It becomes lower in internet costs because you're offering it regionally. It's easier access. Like, if you go to one building, the Wi-Fi would be better, right? Rather than standing outside. Similar concept, you can make it regional. And you can bring smart devices based on the need in that particular region. So through all this, actually e-governance becomes easier. How do you manage that particular region? So some examples internationally is like, if you use specific spectrum for specific usage, there can be millions of dollars of benefit. It says that New York Stock Exchange uses microwave spectrum, and they're able to, because of split-second difference, they're able to earn 100 million more per year, right? If you look at some of the regional ones, the IoT for agriculture, I think I explained it yesterday, is you have sensors at different levels. It can be the soil sensor, it can be the sensor on the tractors or whatever vehicles that you use, or you can have towers where FluxNet has already towers for detecting vaporization, etc. And then you have satellite data, right? So it's all at different levels. And you can even fly drones and take pictures of your crops to see what kind of disease may be there, the pest may be there. So you can actually get all the data given back to the farmers so that they can actually look at what's called precision farming. That means they're able to plan for their investments, their crops, understand the market, which market is offering them better prices. So they're able to do what's called, I think I have jumped, which I didn't realize. Okay, So you can even plan when do you want to buy your pesticides or whatever. If there is going to be rains tomorrow morning, I don't have to water the fields today evening, right? You can plan accordingly. It's like really useful for the farmer if you're able to provide connectivity and all the related technologies which can help them do better farming. I mean, some of the countries are focusing farming from what I heard this morning and yesterday morning. So it may be very important to look at these kind of opportunities and provide technology, infrastructure, and services, all three. So let's look at examples of healthcare, right? Remote management, remote diagnosis, because many doctors are not willing to go to rural areas. How do you help them out? How do you enable them to, you can do training, you can help them, you can you can do diagnosis remotely. You can even plan for remote ICU management. Doctors cannot be there all the time. There's an emergency response. Doctor cannot reach in 5 minutes if there is, situation. So how do you actually enable through technology and better, most important thing here we are talking about is very good quality digital connectivity. So you can make the difference for your daily requirements. Education, of course, I don't have to touch because everyone knows in the current day education is taught from different countries to different parts of the world. And if there are issues related to violence or wars, whatever, you can still sit at home and learn if there is connectivity, right? There's no problem of that as well. So in summary, just make sure that you have all technologies available because you give the option for businesses as well as the customer the choice. And then help build newer technologies and offerings. Without that, connectivity is of no use. And you can even figure out multi-country model, especially for ASEAN. It's like smaller countries close to each other, sharing borders. How do you figure a multi-country model if you're investing heavily in IT infrastructure and digital connectivity? So last but the most important thing is the policy change. Each country policies are very different from other, and enabling that is a bigger challenge that we are seeing in every part of the world. You have to go by examples, you have to go by best practices from other countries, you have to understand the local needs, and based on that is when you make the policy change, is when the implementation actually happens. Thank you.
So we'll follow the format of previous group discussion, not just questions. You can put forth your views, comments, followed by questions for her as well.
Thank you, ma'am, for the presentations. So I came from the state of Penang in Malaysia. And just a couple of years ago, our state government just launched a free Wi-Fi for everyone. So I was just, I guess, wanted to throw this out to, where's the screen? Okay, all right. Just wanted to throw this out to everyone, I guess, to see if there's the feasibility of, I guess, the local government or state government across, I guess we'll start from ASEAN first, to have this free Wi-Fi so that it can increase the connectivity as people move along. So I guess the question here is that how feasible is that if we have this proposal to be put forward? Thank you.
Yeah, Wi-Fi connectivity is the most common one that's used because if you look at some of the technologies I talked about, the radio waves need to match. So you may have to have that on your devices. So the last mile, as we call it, Wi-Fi is the most common one that's used. But there are issues related to Wi-Fi, as you know, that it cannot go beyond a certain distance. And if it's in an open air, you cannot get good Wi-Fi connectivity. So there are certain issues related to Wi-Fi technologies. But that doesn't mean that you should not do it because that's the immediate one which can be easily implemented. And it's a well-known technology everyone can use. Yeah, offering free Wi-Fi by governments is a very good initiative, and I hope all countries can do that.
Hello, My name is Wei Pyu. I'm from Myanmar. I also run a technology company based in Myanmar. As an entrepreneur myself, I have been a very strong advocate of ICT 4E for the past 8 years. I would like to express sincere gratitude towards Microsoft Research India as well. You have done a great work in terms of sustainable development within the technology. I have a few questions. Basically, I came from Myanmar. The internet connectivity is really expensive there. We have now more than like 20 million mobile internet users over the past few years. But the challenge is the cost of internet, the cost of bandwidth is really expensive there. I understand from an Indian perspective, you guys hosted a really big telecom conference in February, right? But the main purpose is to actually leverage the multi-year research and development of technologies, which is done in India, to be exported to the whole ASEAN region. But the real question is like, not just a trade export, but in terms of empowerment or in terms of advocacy and advisory to the policy level, or in terms of like research level, is there any work being done to actually help out the other regions?
So this would be largely government's initiative. So
right.
I think.
But maybe like, could you also share a little bit about like Microsoft Research, the past experience, like.
Okay, I'm not with them anymore, but
right,
collaborative way is a very good way to learn things. I'm sure you would have heard of it. That's why you're commenting on it. We always made sure that people working in that field somehow worked with us in specific areas. If you look at healthcare, if you look at agriculture, we did a lot of work at that time. And collaboration is the only way to expose and also make sure that others are also benefited. That's the only way we did it as a company. But if it is between governments, governments will have to take call.
Hi, I'm from Cambodia. We're trying to address something I think is very important for us. Our industry, one of our biggest industries is agriculture. And we want to work, as you had mentioned in one of your slides, about the fertilizer and access to the farmers. Our biggest challenge is actually, once we have the data collected, and so there is a database, and that database can be accessed with your smartphones. But then there's pockets of the rural areas where there's no internet coverage, no 3G, no 4G. So one solution is an IVR, right, an interactive voice response system. Using their $10 Nokia phones, we will just call and get the information. So that's one way. I was just asking, maybe are there any other options to actually give access to pockets where there's no internet, coverage, no 3G or 4G? That's one. The other is that the challenges with farmers, they're not maybe as literate. And so even if they have access to the internet and using a smartphone or using an app, what suggestions can you actually give to us can help them ease in to getting them onto the digital age and using apps and Facebook? What would we suggest as an educational first step?
Yeah. Connectivity is an issue in many parts of rural areas, both in India and any part of the world, I would say. There was some experiment being done by, few companies, I'm not sure I should name them, by taking some kind of boosters to each region on a vehicle and parking them for a good number of hours so that, some of the rural areas can get benefited whenever they're parked there. Okay, that was one experiment that was done in India. And that did have some results, right? And the second thing is, getting them to do everything on their own when they're not familiar is not an easy thing. Government will have to have a representative who can actually get fundamentally, if you look at some of these countries, the farmers may own 2 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres, right? And they can't afford the technologies I was talking about. It's like large, investment. So the governments can look at investments for each village, and they consolidate that. And they actually have a representative who will advise them by going to the region. And I heard somebody commenting yesterday, I think, in Gujarat, they have what's called a digital learning center in many places where villagers can go and learn how to use technologies or get some basic training on how to use whatever is offered, what service is offered, right? And you can look at offering text-free user interfaces. I was giving this example again, like, if somebody's got tomatoes grown and they can click on the, picture of a tomato, then they can actually, most of them are numerically literate, even if they're illiterate, right? They can easily understand what's the market, where is it, where should they go, what should they do. So text-free user interface also needs to be designing overall matters quite a bit when you're looking at rural areas for service.
Ma'am, can I just take a minute to just clarify or just give out some information about these two previous questions that have been asked from Myanmar and Cambodia. I am from the Ministry of External Affairs, and I would just like to share or address this particular concern. The Prime Minister had announced a US $1 billion line of credit for all the ASEAN countries to promote or enhance connectivity, primarily physical connectivity and digital connectivity. This was announced at the India-ASEAN Summit in 2015, and the process has been taken forward by the Department of Telecommunications and the Telecom Equipment and Services Export Promotion Council, also called the TEPC, which is an autonomous body under the DOT, the Department of Telecommunication. What has been done subsequently is that country-wise specific projects have been prepared by TEPC to enhance digital connectivity in each of the ASEAN countries respectively. These specific projects, depending upon the requirements and needs of each country, have been studied by TEPC, and proposals and projects, concrete proposals and projects in the form of recommendations have been prepared and have been shared with each of the countries. So like the question came from Cambodia about digital village, there is a specific project on digital village that has been prepared and details have been shared with all countries. So I just wanted to highlight that this work has already been done. Possibly the governments, respective governments, are yet to disseminate details of these projects which can be undertaken by Indian companies in your respective countries, not standalone, possibly as a joint venture with the entrepreneurs, private entrepreneurs in each of these countries. These projects can be undertaken. There is money available for doing it. So we request that in case you are not aware of this, please share your contact details with us. We will disseminate details of these projects with you so that you can possibly analyze them and then get back to your respective governments to see if you would like to execute these projects in your countries jointly with Indian telecom companies.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you are able to clarify, because I was hoping that there's some government representative who can talk about the money and the engagement part of it. I could only talk about how ready we are in terms of we have all the technologies in place. Being the IT leader, we have hardware capability, software capability, as well as digital infrastructure. I'm glad that you were able to highlight the 1 billion part as well, which I was not aware of. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm Sheena and I'm from the Philippines. Actually, the answer to this question has been answered already, or has been tackled in the previous queries. And I'd just like to ask, what other best practices that India government has in making it as the IT technology lead, in the world, and what policy can you suggest that has been enacted and successfully implemented in India or even in other parts of ASEAN that we could adopt in the Philippines? Because the reality is we are at the bottom of the list of the countries in ASEAN which has slow internet connection. And one good news, the President just signed the new law that provides for free internet connection in public places in the Philippines. So aside from that, maybe learn from you, from India, or other best practices aside from the digital learning centers, other digital structures? Thank you.
So let me go back to the fundamental approach, right? India identified the IT sector as a major business opportunity. And the first thing they did was they increased the number of engineering colleges and increased the skill base. That means there were a lot more students who studied IT, computer science, electronics, many things, telecommunications, all are interrelated, as you know. So that gave the skill base, right? So the demand went up and the supply also increased. Because there were so many engineers easily available, the skill set was good and the quality of engineers was so good. Worldwide, everyone started outsourcing it to India and it became easier for us to have a larger skill set base. That's a fundamental thing that we did. And based on that, there are entrepreneurs, there's constant encouragement to increase the manufacturing and all other segments, right? All these are based because of the education provided and the quality of education offered. In addition to that, you were talking about the digital training and digital. So India has always done that. They have got what's called NPTEL, for example, the video-based lectures, which is made available for students across the country. And there's literacy for adult literacy as well as rural literacy. When we say literacy, it need not be just learning how to read and write. There is financial literacy. That means how do you open a bank account? What do you do? And there's agriculture literacy. So you actually share the best practices to improve the entire ecosystem. You cannot just say that I have connectivity, so what do I do? But you need to work on all other things to utilize the connectivity and the technology that is available. So you need to take a holistic approach.
Hello, my name is Ning. I come from Vietnam. I would like to share with all of you, with you and IPA delegates, about some IT, the role of the IT in connectivity, and also raise the concern and ask for your recommendation. Because as some of you may know, in ASEAN, we also concerned about how to connect the country together. And in the parliament side, I know that we have a project about the IPA Internet. I mean, that initiative comes from Vietnam because we said that ASEAN would like to build the community and make the legal harmonization. But each country with a very different legal system, and we don't know which country how do the law and how the laws is. So that's why we would like to know that other country, how law is making and how the content of each law they would like to build. And from that idea, the IPA Secretariat support to build the IPA Internet, and now it is working. But the thing is, I think from the expectation, we now seems to be like 10 countries confused with how to run the internet working effectively, because I think with the IT we can do with the technology, but the effectively depends on the government and the willing and the management and the willingness to support the information. So from your side and other ASEAN country, could you give us the recommendation that how to run the IT project to keep our expectation from beginning? I mean, with the IT technique we can do that, but how to run it well and achieve with our expectation is like seems to be like confused now. Thank you.
So it's a hard question to answer because that was the last bullet on my slide in the summary, right? The policy of each country differs from the other. And it's not easy to convince a government based on our viewpoint, because citizen looks at it differently from how the government perceives it, or they will have their own issues they need to address. Possibly I can request MEA representative to see whether meet on to address the policy issues in the region can be held. I would say government level discussion to change the policy and see how everyone can utilize it is the only way forward. And the second thing is public-private partnerships, right? You are enabling technologies and services through public-private partnership. And when you bring in the private sector, they always have to deliver in time. And they also have to make sure the technology is advanced on a regular basis and customer is satisfied. A PPP model is also important for the growth in this segment.
Ma'am, can I also clarify one more issue on this? There is already a proposal that has been, under discussion for about more than a year now of developing a fiber optic network. It's called GPON, Gigabyte Passive Optic Network, which was under discussion between India and ASEAN. The project envisages establishment of this India ASEAN-wide kind of a network using this fiber optic cable and this technology. The ASEAN Secretariat has approved this project, and a pilot study in 4 countries is likely to commence very soon. It is being funded out of the ASEAN India Fund, and in 4 countries this kind of a pilot project will come up, and once that becomes successful, it will possibly then get extended to all the countries.
Thanks again. I'm sure the reason why we're all not aware of is it's not been communicated to the relevant countries possibly and made aware. So we should focus on more communication, maybe that will help resolve many issues.
Hello ma'am, I'm Chinmay Saxena from India. I think looking at other questions as well, there seems to be a common concern regarding the adaptability of these huge reforms towards the digital literacy, especially considering India being a majority rural population, a majority of our population is rural. So you talked about user-friendly interfaces that will enable people even with lower levels of literacy to interact better and proceed with that. But my concern is considering the priorities of government towards the banking areas, enabling, like we've heard about schemes like direct benefit transfers and all. I think it still needs a higher level of security, and there are, it's a little bit different from other measures and other schemes. The banking area seems to be a little bit tricky considering the rural population. So do you think there needs to be a different kind of approach towards it, or are we already working on it?
So security, every country will be focusing on security. Every technologist, every company, country, that's an ongoing process. It cannot be ignored. Today's technology, you can secure it. Tomorrow there's a new upgraded version. Again, it's open for hacking or whatever, right? So it's an ongoing process, and there are cryptographers who constantly encrypt data to make sure. But there are certain things which, as you mentioned, rural areas, they're not aware of, right? Sharing the bank account or sharing the password. Its initial glitches will be there. That's what I was talking about adult literacy, right? They're not just saying that adult literacy means I'm just teaching you alphabets. They're actually Government of India is making a lot of effort in educating people on financial literacy and various other kinds of literacy that's required for rural areas. And also, if you see many rural areas, at least 1 or 2 people from each family are already in urban areas. The migration has happened. So they tend to teach them back on how to handle things, how to do things, and how not to do things. But it is an evolution and a learning process, and it will get fixed over a period of time. You cannot have every solution on the very first day.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Abhijit. I had a quick couple of questions. One is, who pays for the digital infrastructure to be set up in a country? Because, if we look at a very narrow point of view, setting up internet for a home, etc., may not be a big investment, but if you look at a wider ambit of governance and investment in technology, it does have a huge cost just as much as building a highway or a roadways. So who really pays for it, and what are the models you have seen which have succeeded? Because even like in India, we have seen plenty of PPP projects in other infrastructure sectors, and that hasn't quite necessarily worked. So how does the investment in infrastructure happen, in digital infrastructure happen? Since you have worked with Microsoft previously and have observed various countries, and one of the member here had raised about policies as well, the variation in policy, I also wanted to seek your opinion on what are the kind of regulatory hurdles you have seen in several countries, including in India, because digital infrastructure or development in technology is something that government is always catching up with. So whenever the government falls behind, they tend to, first thing they do is just regulate it or put some restrictions on it and let us catch hold of it. So what are some of your observations on that front? And just to share one example with some of the friends from other countries is that yesterday while discussing on the sustainable development goals, one of the things I had raised was access to services being a challenge in India because it's such a wide country. There are rural areas where the governance can't necessarily reach. So one of the things which the government in recent years has done is establish something as CSCs, Common Service Centers, in various rural areas. Even though it falls under the Ministry of IT, what it has done is partnered with various ministries involved in implementation of schemes. So it might be Girl Child Education, Ministry of Women and Child Development will be implementing a scheme in a rural area, or Ministry of Urban Development will be doing some other work, or say HRD in terms of accessing education. So they all tie up with the common service centers to ensure that these services are available in rural areas. So just like you have a digital center where people can go and learn, the CSCs offer a great opportunity for the government to ensure that services on a wide ambit of schemes are available at a one-stop center in rural areas as well. So that is something which might be in place for other countries, or it might still be needed. Thank you.
Okay, so coming to the infrastructure part of it, the investment, I would say if it is like optical fiber network and satellites and those kind of infrastructure, it's obviously paid by the government, and obviously we're all paying for it because through tax and things like that. But the private companies are also investing, right? If you look at Google or Facebook or Microsoft or anybody, they're also investing. How do they invest? They bring their own equipment, either beam from the sky or look at various possibilities and make it available, right? But there are some issues. Even there, it is mostly, I mean, you commented that government just at some point in time says can't be done kind of thing, right? It happens because of multiple reasons. There can be citizen protests. For example, free basics offered by Facebook and Reliance went through that. We had to completely close down that project. And sometimes there are trade bodies. Trade bodies are pretty strong. Cellular Operations Authority of India. There are many such trade bodies which have their agenda to be fulfilled, and they push the government back saying that we need to be prioritized. So the policies are very dependent on the reactions from citizens to trade bodies to impact on the business, existing businesses. You can't ignore the existing businesses as well. So based on that is where the decisions are happening. So every country goes through this. It's not India. It's not, just US. Every country has their own issues. If you look at TV white spaces, I worked in that area. In US, FCC guidelines are so stringent. It's hard, you hardly find any spectrum between TV channels to see whether you can actually have the TV white spaces offering. So each country, it need not be developed or developing countries. They all have their own issues. Policies are made based on those issues which need to be addressed. So, you don't have a simple, straightforward answer. as I said, sharing best practices can help each other, other countries as well.
Anybody else? Somebody?
I just wanted to ask, we are talking about connectivity, we are talking about digitalization, but there is a concept called, there is need of digital literacy also is very much required, because there is whole age group which is far away from this digital literacy, and they are facing problem, because during demonetization also we face that so many people got cheated because they don't know how to transfer the money through internet. Even on our ATM also, such things happens on regular basis, somebody cheating them. So don't you, ma'am, how you are looking at the things, digital literacy will be important aspect, because we all were behind the literacy a decade ago. Now it's time for digital literacy. So we are developing at a pace on one side of connectivity, digitalization. How about the digital literacy? How you are looking at this point, ma'am?
Sorry? Yeah. So digital literacy has started more than a decade ago, because when you started using the phone itself, you know that you're using digital literacy in some form or the other, right? If you have to really read and write, you should know how to type those things. There are centers in rural areas where they're doing that. Digital literacy is used for everything, including Swachh Bharat, for example, right? Whether to train the district panchayat leader or the district administrator, the people who are actually working on it, how to train them. It can be through videos if they're illiterate, right? If they can't read and write, there are videos that are made. So digital literacy is an ongoing effort which is done by almost all the government departments, especially in India, and it's offered in rural centers and also handled remotely in some cases. So it is an effort, but reaching and being able to learn matters, and some people are not comfortable even now using technology. It does take some time, and things will change gradually.
Thank you, Vidyaji, because we all are young generation of ASEAN, and we experienced the Arab Spring, which was a outcome of social media, what social media can do. The Arab Spring was the best example of the social media generated movement. But apart from social media, Facebook and Twitter can generate a movement. But leaders from ASEAN, leaders like you and me, has to become faces of those movements. Then only those movements will be successful. Otherwise, those movements will go, these movements will come, and this movement will go. We have to become leader, and we have to become faces for such social media generated movement. So with them, I'm very thankful for such an insightful presentation, which connected lot of people and lot of country really through digital networks, and really we can think of some like digital village in Vietnam, such kind of ideas we can really take ahead in our countries as well. So thank you very much for such insightful presentation. Now we'll move for the lunch, and sharp 3:30 we'll gather at Darbar Hall for the presentation by Madhya Pradesh government. Thank you.